since we got here, I think we drafted like the second most offensive line, right? So, and then I think it's like we need to do a better job of like figuring out who you're paying, right? So we've spent at other positions. So again, since 2010, so we've like the guys that have left our offensive line, it's the second most group, right? Of the guys we've drafted left and gone other places. So to your point that I was talking about in the IPF, it's not a level of importance. It's a level of figuring out like, you're going to play a defensive end, you're going to play, so that's kind of like, and looking back at your decisions, like what would you do differently, that sort of thing.
Okay, so what he's saying is here, we have drafted the second most offensive line in my tenure. Since I've been here, we've drafted the second most offensive linemen. However, we clearly need to do a better job of figuring out who to pay and figuring out how to, pay the right guys to keep them here. So it's not a matter, I think in John Schneider's mind, of not taking shots, though I'd argue they don't draft interior guys high. It's been a matter of when we've targeted them in free agency, have we spent enough on good guys? Did we overspend on bad guys? Like it feels like there's a step 2 to this where he's maybe more focused on.
Yeah, it sounds like he's going through his memory and saying, man, we paid too much for that. Maybe we could have done more with him to keep him here.
Yep.
And we've tried in the draft too. Like we drafted guys. I've said this plenty of times in this show. It's not like they're not trying with offensive linemen. They draft guys all the time, but the development part isn't there, and then the keeping them and the bringing them isn't there. So you can look at every angle of the offensive line in the John Schneider tenure, and you could say, all right, well, that's not his strong suit. That's not his strong point. So hopefully with Kubiak coming over, with his run game coordinator, his run game specialist, they have some different insight, and they could evaluate offensive linemen a little bit differently and give him something else to look at, because him even having that soundbite lets you know that he's recognizing that the process is off. Like we have to figure something out, and maybe the new guys here can help.
One last cut from this same scrum. I'm going to pause. I'm not going to play the whole cut for you guys because, again, the audio is a little tough, but it's an important conversation where they need to improve in evaluating the offensive line.
The person, like, figuring out, like, okay, what kind of competitor are we getting? And there's a level of intelligence in how they see the game, like the quickness of which they see the game, especially with the wide zone, like being able to, like, these guys got to be able to adjust on the run, on the move. Like, we're running off the ball. Last year we were on offense, it didn't run off the ball, right? So, okay, now we have a new coaching staff. These guys have to be, it's the person and then the competitor, and then with our new system, figuring out how they adjust. The pass protection stuff that never really changes because it's where we are right now.
Okay, so Bump, what I hear here, and tell me if this is what you do as well, yeah, we've drafted guys that are physically gifted, but maybe we aren't drafting guys that have the right mindset, that have the right ability and football IQ to adapt in the ways we need them to.
Yeah, I hear that. I also hear we just don't have the right guys in general. Like, we just don't.
Yeah.
We don't. And it's a bunch of things. I don't think you can never point to one thing when it comes to a player, what he's good at, what he's weak at, or as a group in general. But it comes back to the process. Like, what is it like? What does your spreadsheet look like when you're watching film and you're seeing if an offensive lineman fits into what you're trying to do? That's what I hear. I hear him saying a lot, but it all comes down to we just haven't been able to get this right, whether it be mental, physical, emotional. There's a lot that goes into it. So it needs to be fixed ASAP. But I also think that some of the guys that they drafted still have a chance. I think Laumea still has a chance. I think that you got to wait for Haynes, give him another year or two, see if he develops. He has a chance. I'm not ready just to give up on the guys that they've gotten here, but I think that there's a sense of urgency that he has because he realizes for us to be a good team, I got to have a better offensive lineman to protect my quarterback. So maybe I switch things up, but you can't just let everybody go and say, all right, we're going to start all over with this offensive line. It's impossible. Can't do that. So he's doing a lot of reflecting, and I can appreciate that because it sounds like he's looking in the mirror and putting it on him. What can I do better to make sure we're getting the right guys here?
Well, and look, not to rehash the same point, but the idea of drafting a lot, I feel like a natural follow-up for me is, but where? Why? Now, he isn't alone in not drafting a lot of interior guys in the first round. That's just not a position that's typically like snatched up super early. You're going to look at tackles there. But, do you feel comfortable with the lack of shots you've taken on first-round interior guys? Is that a position you just simply, through the last several classes you've never had an interior guy ranked high where you thought he's worth it? You know what I mean? Like, you're telling me that only once ever you've had an interior guy ranked that high that you thought was worth it in 14, 15 draft classes? It could be a philosophical thing there of you being like, I truly think I can find depth there later. But if you haven't been able to, are you comfortable taking a center or taking a guard at 18?
I'm looking at last year's draft, all right? And just the first round alone, you got a tackle taken 5th overall, a tackle taken 7th overall, a tackle taken 11th overall, a tackle at 14th, a tackle at 18th. You got your first guard, Troy Fautanu, at 20, and then you have another tackle. So it's not like he's alone when it comes to the idea of you don't take guards early. You can find those guys later. But are you willing to risk it to get the guard that you want at 18? Me personally, at this point, I'm ready to risk it if I were him, because that is the missing link. And I don't think you need to go crazy. Like, you get one young guy, but you got to go get another veteran. I'm not saying let's put the offensive line, to me, it's shakiest when there's like 2 or 3 rookies on that line. You don't want too many rookies out there because of communication. It's the physicality of the game, and it's just a different game. You don't want to rely on rookies. But is he willing to go out there and do something that typically doesn't happen, which is take a guard early? And the reason why Fautanu was taken early was because he could play guard and the tackle spot. So are you looking at a guard tackle swing type of guy? Are you looking at moving Abe to the guard spot, which we heard someone recommend that? There's this combination that you can have with that offensive line that affects the future of it, but it comes down to what you said. Are you willing to risk it and do something you haven't done before and typically doesn't happen in the NFL, which is take a guard in the first round?
Right. It's obviously a fascinating conversation, and one that if I were John Schneider, I'd probably feel defensive of. I'd be like, I've tried. I've taken all these guys. What do you want me to do? I've paid guys in free agency. I've drafted guys. Like, I have traded for offensive linemen. What do you want me to do? But I think that there's a very uncomfortable option, which is draft way out of your comfort zone. Yeah. And if it doesn't work out, then you were right. You were right all along, and it's going to be a big I told you so moment. And he would never do something like that to appease fans. He's going to take the player he thinks is best. But I don't know, man. When you get a decade plus of the same issue, part of it's bad luck, investment, and finances elsewhere. But part of it is there's a flaw in the plan. There's a flaw in the approach. There's a hole in this system. So where is it? Is it development?
It's eval.
Is it evaluation?
It's eval. It starts at eval. I mean, you grab your guys, you draft them, and then you hope you develop them. But it's the starting point. Like, how much more does this young man need to grow before we trust him to be a starter in the game? And we saw that the starting point for this group has been kind of shaky because, we saw like 3 or 4 rookies this year. At some point, get an opportunity. Now, some of it was out of necessity, right? Because Connor Wynn's retired. You got to move Olu around, and you got to try some things, right? Forsyth is banged up. Anthony Bradford is hurt at one point. It wasn't just, okay, we're not good enough at this spot, so we got to rotate some guys in. But when they got their opportunity, it was never a consistent, like, back-to-back weeks where we felt good about the line. We felt good about the line one week, and then the following week is like, okay, we're back to the line that we've known for the past few years. So it's a lot of it is circumstantial. I'm sure they would have preferred to not have rookies be in there, but you do get a chance to see what they're made of at this point. It's where they start at. They got to find an interior lineman that's not starting at the traditional 3rd round pick for a rookie when it comes to guard talent.